Hello, and welcome to Barrett's Book Nook. Before we start, I'm currently reading Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaghy, and currently sipping on a nice vanilla latte. Feel free to let me know what you're reading and sipping on today as well. Now let's get started. So, I read a lot growing up. I feel like that might be slightly self-explanatory, but among all the mini books I read in the mini-series and every single book in my elementary school library, there were a few that really stuck out and shaped who I was and I suppose what I've become. So let's take a look at my library of childhood. Starting us off is usually a bookworm favorite, Matilda by Roald Dahl. Granted, I've read all of the Roald Dahl books, full collection, autobiographies included, but Matilda always stood out as one of the favorites. Besides the fact that I was a young, ambitious, gifted child that deeply related to the overly ambitious genius of Matilda who read too many books and wanted to live in a library. Matilda was just one of those books that was easy, really connected with young me, and I still love Matilda to this day. I've got a Matilda sticker on the back of my laptop and it gives me a little bit of happiness every time I see it, just like I get a little bit of happiness every time I read it. Also, the Matilda movie is fantastic and still holds up, so if you haven't read or seen it for some odd reason, please change that today. Next up, we have The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by Boyne. One of those must-reads, and I probably can't keep count of the amount of times that I've read this book. It is absolutely fantastic, touching. I was a World War II nerd growing up, so this was a nice little niche for me. Who doesn't love the story of a kid realizing another kid? And it's so dark, but so good. And this book made me cry so much. The movie also made me weep every time I saw it. But as much as this book touched me, it was not the first book to make me cry. So let's go look at that one. Katherine Paterson's The Bridge to Terabithia wrecked my heart. I realize that most of these books that I have so far have had movie adaptations, which makes sense because they're classic stories and they impacted a lot of youth. But this one really wrecked my soul. First book to make me cry, and I still remember what happened to this day. It was 1 a.m., I'm reading with a flashlight, as one does, and I got to the part that makes you cry, and I cried so hard and loud that my mother came running thinking I was dying. Nope, I was just emotionally wrecked with this little paper book in front of me. And then she told me, "Barrett, it is time to go to bed." And I said, "No, I have to finish it." And she's like, "No, you have to go to bed." I finished it anyways. But if you need another little story of children being children, dark things happening, it's a classic, a must-read. Probably need to rewatch the movie. I can't give you a proper rating on that one, but it's out there. God, what is it about books that make me cry that I connect with? Let's continue this emotional train with Ginny Rorby's Hurt Go Happy. Now this one, I cannot remember how it came into my possession, how this book ended up on my bookshelf. I am going to assume it was probably the library was selling old books and this ended up in a pack, but either way, it is such a beautiful story. It's about this girl who, through abuse, is left hard of hearing and deaf. So she feels very isolated because her parents are very ableist and don't allow her to learn sign language, so she has to take that upon herself. And it's just this story about her finding herself, finding a group, and animals, and how animals can heal children and vice versa. And it's just a beautiful story, very touching. Pick it up if you haven't heard of it and read it as soon as possible. All right, we love animals, and I love cats in particular. So Dewey by Vicki Myron is phenomenal. I love Dewey the Library Cat with all my heart. Nonfiction, the only nonfiction in my pile. But Dewey is a fantastic little library cat. What a good boy. What a good boy. And I have read the picture book when I was at picture book level, and then I read this one as soon as I was allowed to grab chapter books with my grubby little hands, and I just love this cat. Who to put it? So if you want to hear the story about a cute little lovable library cat capturing the hearts of millions, and even more so once this book came out, then pick it up. And if you don't feel like reading a whole chapter book, there is a picture book version with beautiful illustrations. So whatever suits your fancy, learn about Dewey. He's a good boy. I could not complete the list of books that shaped my childhood without talking about Sharon M. Draper, and more specifically, her book, Out of My Mind. Another beautiful story centered around this girl named Melody who has cerebral palsy, and basically it's this story about her growing and making friends at school and joining the quiz bowl team, and talks about the struggles she faces as someone who is unable to verbally communicate with the world around her, relying on boards and technology and people, and having people underestimate you because of your abilities or their presumed lack thereof. And it's such a fantastic story, and this one is quite a riot because this book and I have been on a journey. This was my bedtime reading, and that doesn't mean, oh, I read like a little chapter before I went to bed and tee. No. Every night before I would go to bed, I would read the entire book. I don't know why. It was just such a fascinating story to me, and I was so deeply entrenched in everything it was about that I read it over and over and over again. I'd be like, I can't sleep. Time to read. And this was my go-to, and I read it so much. In 4th grade, funny story number 1. In 4th grade, we had a little book project, and we could do all these things related to the book that we were reading, and I was like, I know this book like the back of my hand. I'm gonna choose this one. And I chose the book, and one of the things is you could give a speech from the perspective of your character, of the main character. So I went to my church, borrowed a wheelchair, and got in full costume, and I recorded a video of me in a robotic voice giving the spiel, gotta follow the rubric here, y'all. And basically it was an opt-out. I gotta sit in a chair and press a video and play videos, but I really loved the story. But that's not where the funny part comes in. The funny part is we had a blood drive that day, and me being an ever overachieving volunteer, of course signed up for the first shift. Not at all because it would get me out of classes. No, I just really love to volunteer. But I wanted to stay in character because I am an actor as well. Young childhood community theater me was like, no, I'm in this chair, I am Melody. And I wheeled myself across the school to the gymnasium where we were having the blood drive. And so I looked normal, and I, wheeled up, and I realized, shoot, there are stairs to get where I need to go. And so I sat there because I did not want to break character. I refused to break character. That drew the attention of all the parents that had signed up to donate at this blood drive. And so they all kind of looked at each other and they started to move towards me. And right before a bunch of them, you know, started to do the, oh, can we help you? I was like, frick, I will do it myself. And so I just stood up, picked up the wheelchair. I didn't just pick up the wheelchair. I picked it up over my head. Very excessive. You know, teacher asked for strong boys to carry chairs. That was all me. But I picked up this chair and I walked up the stairs and they thought they witnessed a miracle in my small Bible Belt town. No, just the kid that refused to leave character until the very last second. Funny story number 2 is that this was actually a book that was given as assigned reading in the 6th grade as our like big literary project. And I walked up to the teacher. She's like, this is the book we're doing. And I said, I've already read this one. And she's like, oh, well, you can reread it. And I'm like, you don't understand. I've read this book like 30 times. Is there any other way that I can read something else? And she's like, well, I can give you the test, and if you pass it, I'll let you do whatever you want while everyone else reads this book. And I'm like, that's a great deal. Got 100 on that test, and so then that meant that I had a designated 90 minutes per day where I could just sit in the back of the classroom and read as many books as I wanted of whatever books I wanted while everyone else slowly got through each chapter. It was delightful. Either way, Out of My Mind has given me many memories and is still one of my favorites. So if you haven't heard of Sharon Draper or this book, please give it a chance. It is amazing. On the subject of assigned reading, The Tale of Despereaux. Granted, Kate DiCamillo's books in general are amazing and I love them, but The Tale of Despereaux stuck around a little bit more prominently than the others. Mostly because as part of my GT program, we had to do projects on it. And it's a beautiful story and has a lot of vivid imagery that as a young artsy kid I could revel in, and I was like, I get to do art with this? Perfect. It's a lovely tale, twisting and turning. You get a lot of different perspectives if you're one of those that you like different POVs and jumping around and seeing different parts of the story happen simultaneously. It's a classic, it's a wonderful read. I mean, it's an award-winning book. You've got to check it out. It's indescribable at this current moment, but it really stuck around. Another one that I've reread multiple times. I think all of these books I've reread multiple times. That's just the nature of me. But it's just a beautiful story. And Red Thread will never look the same to you after finishing it. So if you're intrigued, check this one out. Our last book is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. A fantastic read. Stay golden. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, you gotta change that. Look at that. Super achievable. And what a lovely story. You know, if you love any stories about the preps and the non-preps going up against each other, if you like 50s stories, if you like young boys learning about life and love and what family really is, The Outsiders is for you. The Outsiders is truly one of those stories that I read quite often, and you know, it's very well written, but also it's a story that is very iconic, very much so to the point that it was adapted into a film, an amazing one at that, truly a wonderful movie, and also a play, which I was a part of. I did not get cast, but as any true theater nerd, if you don't get cast, you join the crew. And so I worked tech for that show in a black box theater, so up close, all the stabbings, drownings, slurs in between, all up close and personal. And it was such an amazing story, not only to read, but also to witness it be given life through theater. So this is one of those stories that I ended up connecting with so deeply, not because of the words itself, but the story and the experiences it gave me when I was able to see it done in theater and be a part of that creative process. Oh! I forgot one book. Oh my god, let me go grab that fudge. Now, I was about to end this and I realized that I left out a very vital book. So, allow me to correct my mistakes. The art book. Not a written book. In fact, this book is all visuals. It is pages upon pages of amazing, fantastic, iconic paintings throughout history from different periods. And this was my Bible growing up. As a kid who grew up with an appreciation for art, stemming from my mother being a classics major and constantly having art and mythology and Latin and all those fantastical things around me, this book, as you can see, is very well loved, and for good reason. I just loved looking at different pictures. I had different pieces that I just kept going back to, and I was like, wow, I'm really connecting with this one. Or, I hate that one. Why is that art? Why is that in this book? But more so than that, whenever I started to get into arts and humanities in terms of academic team or quiz bowl or whatever word you all use where you're from, this was I would just walk around. It was my Bible. I'd be sitting there being like, all right. I'm not gonna forget Mondrian. I will not forget those squares. And either way, this was what I brought with me to study. This was what I brought with me to calm myself. It was what I just looked at whenever I just was bored and I needed something to look at. I know there's different versions of the art book, but this is my art book and I like it. And now we've reached the conclusion of today's video. Now, granted, these are not all of the books that shaped my childhood, but these are some of the most memorable ones, the ones that stood out, and perhaps there will be a little sequel to this, and you will get even more of a glimpse into the books that shaped me into being the person that I am today. Now, granted, I haven't read all of these books in a while. Some part of me wants to keep that childhood wonder that I had for each and every one of them. In those moments that I read them for the first, second, third, 30th time, but maybe it is time to give them a little reread and reignite some of that childhood fascination for reading. Let me know if you have any childhood books that really stood out to you, or if you had any childhood series of books that stood out to you. Were you a Harry Potter kid? A Percy Jackson kid? Both? Let me know. I like talking to you, and I like talking about books. And I like talking. So y'all have a good day. Finish your drink. Finish your read for the day. And I'll see you later. Thanks for stopping by Barrett's Book Nook.